Hi, my name is Matt Douglas and I'm the Dean of Students here at Judge Memorial. So I can tell you that just in my lifetime, so I was in high school when Columbine happened, and there was a school shooting at my high school when I was a sophomore. And so I think it puts me in sort of an interesting position, because part of coming of age for me was also living in this world that sort of is faced with this terror. What's really cool is, from what I understand, there has never been an active school shooter at a Catholic school, and so I do think that that's one thing that Catholic schools really do well is we know our students. We know our students who are feeling left out. We know our students who are potentially frustrated or angry. And when you have those types of relationships with students, it makes situations like that far, far, far less likely. So in some ways, it makes the educational landscape, particularly for Catholic schools, pretty encouraging. But on the other hand, it certainly shows that we as a culture and as a country have lots of room for growth. Absolutely. Having adults in your life who you know care about you and want you to be successful, that are there for you when you're dealing with any number of problems that comes with growing up, puts you in a position and puts our community in a position to be safer. If we were to have an active shooter on campus, part of our school's response has been predicated on the state changing the rules. So all schools went to what is called a standard response protocol. The room has a list of all of the standard responses. So teachers have been trained that if there is this situation, this is what the reaction is. Specifically for an active shooter, each person in the main office has a role. So there is a safety switch where we can lock down all the building right outside of my office. So I would lock the entire building down. I would try to engage in slow, and then we would have multiple people in the main office who call 911. We have a safety protocol center where we have maps of all the school, cameras of all the school, and that's where the police would come and set up sort of a presence here on campus. And I'm very proud to say that when we did have a pseudo lockdown where the police department did come and ask us to lock the building down, that they were here on campus from the non-emergency line in less than a minute. And between the time I engaged the officer in front to the part where we started locking the building down, I think we were right around 40 seconds. So I think our response time is really quite good. You know, I think that certainly we would coordinate better communication with our neighbors. So one of the pieces that, like, Rowland Hall reached out and McGillis reached out, because when we were on lockdown, they were not put on lockdown. And so what we did add to the protocol was, when Judge sort of is put in a vulnerable position, we need to also communicate with our neighboring schools to ensure that, you know, if somebody were out loose in the neighborhood, that all of the schools nearby, right? McGillis is a block, Rowland is a block and a half, that everybody sort of in the neighborhood knew. So, you know, certainly we've sort of enhanced the protocols. Two different things, right? So if you believe that armed guards are going to be a deterrent to an active school shooter, you can point to some pretty famous cases that show that armed guards really weren't incredibly effective in limiting the damage of those shooters. Now, that being said, that's not necessarily always the case, but you think about Stoneman in Florida, you think about the latest one in Nashville where they had armed guards. You think about Uvalde, where there was multiple police officers. They're all armed, and I'm not sure that limited the violence there. I think mental health counseling, not only in our state, but for young people all over, I'm not sure it's going to hurt anything. Now, that being said, do having police officers on campus perhaps help deter other behavior that isn't active shooters? Potentially. Right? Like, are kids less likely to engage in illicit substance abuse if they know that there's a police officer on campus? Maybe. Are kids less likely to engage in physical confrontations? Like, are you less likely to get into a fight if you knew that there was a police officer who might arrest you? Again, maybe. But I think I could make the same argument that if there were more mental health resources, then perhaps people who are turning to illicit substance abuse may find other ways to deal with their problems than with illicit substances. And if you had more mental health resources, then maybe you'd find more strategic and healthier ways to deal with your stress and aggression. So I think it's a complicated question. I try to engage our students as much as possible, and thinking about how they would feel. I certainly wouldn't believe that I'm in any position to speak for our student body, but generally, the idea is one where I'm not sure that having an armed guard who isn't trained to work with teenagers. Now, that being said, if someone was, an LCSW or a mental health first aid counselor, and they were also trained as a police officer, I think I would be much more amenable to having that person on campus. Like if they could be part of our community. Generally, we do have armed officers at all football games, at all basketball games, and I'm not sure that has a negative effect on the student body or cheering or anything like that. But that being said, the police officers who serve on our campus are longtime Judge community members, they're graduates of Judge, and so I feel like that may be an unrealistic expectation. So in short, I would probably be in favor of someone who, I wouldn't hate the idea if they had been trained in mental health first aid, that they were good with working with teenagers and they happen to be a police officer. I'm not sure I would have a problem with that, but if it was just a brand new police officer, I'm not sure that's sort of the type of community protection that I would be interested in. I can tell you as because you guys are all what, 15? And I won't ask you about where you sort of stand on the Second Amendment, but I grew up in Texas and I've had firearms and shot firearms since I was 7. So I'm very comfortable with firearms, and I would tell you that I would never carry my firearm at school. I would never carry my firearm at school. I don't see any way where I couldn't engage with a student without that wouldn't lead to a better outcome. And so that's coming from someone who's grown up with firearms, very comfortable with them. The same thing is, I don't know all our teachers' backgrounds, but if I've had them for 25 years, 30 years, and I don't feel comfortable, you would have to be a trained police officer for me to feel comfortable with that. And that would be hard, considering that a lot of our faculty have master's degrees and PhDs, so casually they became police on the weekend. I feel like it's a heavy ask.